My name is Aman Shah, and I'm the replacement for Dr. Nimesh Desai, as has already been mentioned. I work in OP Jindal Global University as the Director of Quality Assurance, Accreditation, and Rankings. And it's indeed my pleasure to introduce the speakers for this afternoon. I have been with higher education institutions for 35 years in Hong Kong, largely, and also for some years in India as well. And I've seen lots of students and colleagues who suffer from depression. In the previous session, you've heard how one student committed suicide and also recorded it and put it on YouTube. I similarly had a similar experience, not related to YouTube, but we had a student who had come on exchange from France to the City University of Hong Kong. Within 3 days after arriving in Hong Kong, this student jumped off a building from the 10th floor. Nobody knows why. And there was complete panic in the university because we hadn't even collected his emergency numbers, his parental numbers, and all that. So these things can happen, but as we all know, depression is something which creeps up maybe slowly and gradually and may remain undiagnosed for many, many years until it becomes visible in a person's behavior. So this is something, an important topic, and we have experts here, so I will not take much of your time, and I will invite the speakers to come here one by one and give their expert opinion. Our first speaker in this panel is Dr. Sharon Carnahan. She's the Executive Director of Rollins College Child Development and Student Research Center in the United States of America, where she has taught undergraduates since 1990. She is Professor of Psychology at Rollins College. Her research specialties are in program evaluation, community engagement, development, screening, and early intervention. Dr. Carnahan.
Thank you so much. As I begin, I want to tell you two things. The first is that several slides I've prepared have already been covered. So I'll do a little bit of that now. We're clicking past it to save some time as we go. The second is I bring a shirt with me. My dear administrative assistant, Vicki, woke up one morning 10 years ago to discover that her father had misunderstood the doctor to say, "You have cancer," instead of, "You don't have cancer." And as his mother had died of cancer, he immediately decided he did not want that life. And he cleaned up his affairs, walked down the street, sat under his favorite tree, stuck a rifle under his chin, and pulled the trigger. My dear friend Vicki, after a year of deep mourning, she's a bit of a spitfire, a bit of an action-oriented person, and she created a local chapter of the American Society for Suicide Prevention. And what she said in a southern U.S. drawl was, "My father took a permanent solution to a temporary problem." And she wanted to prevent people from doing that again. The first year, 100 people showed up to march for suicide prevention in our community. Last year, 2,500 people showed up, and they raised enough money to fund the entire chapter for the next year. I picked up this shirt at the walk. It says, "We'll see you tomorrow." We'll see you tomorrow. Not, "We'll fix it for you." Not, "It's going to go away." Not, "You're going to feel better." Not, "Gosh, I know exactly how you feel. Jeepers, I was sad one time myself." Just, "I'll see you tomorrow. You're going to live till tomorrow. I'll see you for breakfast, okay?" Okay. I wanted to show you that great T-shirt that I got this year at Vicki's Walk. This is the Rollins College Hume House Child Development and Student Research Center. It's only a month old, so I had to show you a picture. we're pleased to open a new laboratory for the study of child development. Okay? I'm going to talk today about maternal depression. Jayshree, age 24, gave birth to her firstborn son in December last year. She went through a natural delivery and she felt triumphant that everything was well. But by about January, she realized how dreadful and depressing motherhood could be. She felt like she was living inside of a gray plastic bag. She couldn't seem to get anything done. In the mornings, she told her counselor, she would cry so loudly in the shower. She couldn't let anybody see her cry, but when she'd get into the bathroom and bathe, she would just burst into tears. She was anxious about the fact that her body had changed with the birth of this baby. She missed her mother, who'd come to stay for 2 weeks and then had to go back home. And she wasn't sleeping. She was breastfeeding the baby, wasn't going that great. She didn't have anybody to talk to, and she couldn't get the baby to settle down. She feared her own thoughts about responsibility for taking care of this brand new little life. No instruction book came with this baby when she gave birth, right? She said, "I didn't understand myself after a few days of giving birth. I felt a rush of fear and sadness. I would cry while taking a shower. My husband was complaining about things not getting done. It was supposed to be such a joy to have a new baby, but all I felt was miserable." Over time, she became more and more sleepless, and insidiously, she began to wake up to feed the baby in the night and then be anxious and jumpy and unable to sleep for the couple of hours until the baby needed to be fed again. And so the sleeplessness began to spiral, okay? By noon every day, she would feel as though she was soaked in a thick syrup and just could barely move, okay? That's what postpartum depression feels like. Okay? Each year, 15 to 20% of adults in the United States experience a major depression, and the incidence among women is twice that of men. It peaks during the childbearing years for women. Among children of depressed mothers, the incidence of depression in children is 5 times higher than compared with other children in the general population. Okay. In India, depression rates are much higher among women than among men. Women are more prone to postpartum depression, and postpartum depression often goes unreported due to the stigma associated with mental illness. Okay. Why do more women get depressed? We heard a great answer to this a minute ago. Let me flesh it out just a little bit. Women are at increased risk of mood disorders in general, and during periods of hormonal fluctuation, such as premenstrually, postpartum, and during perimenopause. Post-delivery mood disorders have a broad range. A solid 50 to 80% of women experience what generally people call the baby blues. They're a little tired, a little crabby, a little bit difficulty coping. They may burst into tears from time to time. But for most women, that's coupled with the joy of this new life, the wonder of the baby, and the encouragement of relatives and friends, and it proceeds and reduces quite quickly. A very small number of people, 0.1% to 0.2% of women, experience postpartum psychosis, usually within the first month after delivery. In a few minutes, we'll look at the difference between postpartum depression, which is a large problem, and postpartum psychosis, which happens to a very small number of people, but it is a much more dangerous situation. Okay? Symptoms of postpartum depression include helplessness and hopelessness, sadness and irritability, and the same symptoms that the other professor mentioned earlier of depression in general. there is a range of symptoms in depression in mothers after the birth of a baby, and this can make it more difficult to diagnose. The symptoms range from mild dysphoria to suicidal ideations to psychotic depression or hallucinations. Untreated, symptoms can last several months or on into the second year after the baby is born. In order to think about the ways to prevent postpartum depression, because unlike many other forms of depression, folks, we know it's coming. We know it's coming. And there's a lot we can do to head it off and prevent it from happening. Okay? Take a quick look. I know many of you are counselors, but let's take a very quick look at the contributions to mental illness in general. In a multi-factor model of mental illness, we see that it originates partly in the biology of the individual. The individual's genes, brain structure, chemistry, background, whether or not an individual has relatives who had experienced depression, whether or not the individual has had other mood disorders in the past, a woman who's experienced depression earlier in life and it is in remission is more likely to experience it again. But factors are also psychological: stress and trauma, learned helplessness, mood-related perceptions and memories, and social. If the expectations on a woman in her culture are extremely high, okay, if she is expected to care for the infant completely on her own, if she is expected to look great and, in my country, you know, show up to church at week 4 or go back to work full time when the baby is 6 weeks old, the social expectations also precipitate depression. But every incidence of mental illness is complicated, and it involves biological, psychological, and social factors every time. As I teach my undergraduates, I tell them that I only want them to remember one thing out of 4 years of college. The next time somebody asks them a question, why does so-and-so behave the way they do? I want my students to say, that depends. I need to know more. Okay. The etiology of postpartum depression, again, is biological, social, and psychological. The biological contributors including hormonal excesses and deficiencies of estrogen or progesterone, prolactin, thyroxine, tryptophan, among others. There is no clear biological explanation. You can't say women whose hormones test this way are going to end up that way. Okay. Socially, the stress of new motherhood, society's demands. Psychologically, a history of poverty and stress or negative self-image. The problem is that postpartum depression is heterogeneous. It doesn't look the same in every person. The postpartum depressed woman may show symptoms of sleeplessness and agitation, or may show symptoms of slowing down and weeping and an inability to cope during the day. Some start immediately after birth, some start at 4 to 6 weeks. Some were depressed before the pregnancy, and some were doing just fine. Okay? Uh-oh, people. Okay? Postpartum psychosis is different. It's rare, but very real. Okay? People who experience postpartum psychosis may experience delusional beliefs, hallucinations, lack of insight, and complete sleeplessness. A woman may be experiencing postpartum depression, losing sleep over time, getting sadder, and then one day she looks at the carpet and the red parts jump up like bugs and start to chase her out of the room. Or she takes the baby and puts the baby in the crib and thinks, if I leave her here till tomorrow, I'm sure she'll be fine. Okay? So there's a radical difference. My time is short. I'm going to move ahead and talk about prevention. Maternal depression has a very high incidence, and we know when it's going to happen. Ergo, we know we have a window. We have a window, and we know what the window is. Then that says screening. We should be asking pregnant women and young mothers about their mental health status whenever we can, at a preconception visit, during prenatal intake, during postpartum exams, when they come in to get the infant shots, when the infant is seen for sick care, if we see a mother crying, as a family plans postpartum contraception, when the mom comes in for a checkup, we should be asking about depression. I'm sure you'll have access to my PowerPoint, and I do provide several sample tests about this, okay? I need to tell you about one program, okay? A low-intensity psychological intervention via lay home health workers that has worked beautifully in South Asia and is moving into India, and it is called the Thinking Healthy model. Do we have people who know about this model? The Thinking Healthy model uses lady health workers to do a simplified cognitive behavioral therapy added to routine perinatal visits. Workers only need 2 days of training to do it well, and then after 6 months they come in for a refresher. They have a guidebook that goes through important questions to ask after the baby is born. It is full of photographs, does not require being able to read, and helps young mothers begin to think positively and problem solve about their conditions, okay? It's being scaled up in high conflict areas where women are experiencing war and family disruption and need emergency help with postpartum depression, okay? The relationship between the parent and child is a dance. And in a dance, both partners have to contribute. You can't just stand there, right? So the characteristics of the baby then will soak up the characteristics of the mother. The baby is trying to dance with the mother who is depressed. And mama won't dance. Mama can't dance. And so the baby begins to withdraw, to stop approaching the mother, to stop reaching out for love and care, and the relationship becomes dysfunctional. This is why babies and children are at higher incidence of depression if their mother is depressed. So in conclusion, maternal and postpartum depressive illnesses are serious and common. Screening, prevention, and low-impact treatments through lay home workers can help. Postpartum psychosis is a serious mental illness, and it needs medical attention right away. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that interesting talk. Our second speaker is Dr. Shobha Vijendra. She is the founding president of Sampurna, which is an NGO, which is devoted towards welfare of women and adolescent girls. She previously worked as a counselor in the Family Life Counseling Center and Drug De-Addiction Center affiliated to the International Abolitionist Federation as a child development and project officer in Haryana, being in charge of 70 Anganwadis. Anganwadis for those who are from other countries, Anganwadi is infant and child care centers, providing various services to women and children of the area at the block level, Dr. Vijender was also part of the bench of magistrate under Juvenile Justice Act 2000 in the Child Welfare Committee for 6 years. Presently, Dr. Vijender is actively involved in Sampurna in the national convener and is the national convener of Mahila Sabhagita Women Project in Bharat Vikas Parishad. May I invite Dr. Vijender. She's going to talk about understanding depression, complexities, and challenges in the social sector. Dr. Vijender.
Thank you so much. And Sharon, the moderator, and Jitendra Nagpalji, and all the researcher scholars, students, and the August gathering. First of all, I would like to thank you to talk about depression and to understand it, and to make understand the people also. And I would further like to thank Mr. Sahani because he has kept the topic, has given me the topic, understanding depression, challenges and complexities in society. Friends, before talking about understanding depression and what problems we are facing, because nowadays this problem has become a very acute problem. Since I'm working in the voluntary sector for the last 23 years as a founder president of Sampurna NGO, it is very important to tell you something what we are doing in this Sampurna. Definitely we are working with the adolescent girls and the women, and there what we try to maximize the potential of an individual, because we all understand every individual has different weaknesses and different assets, and we have to take care of that. Here we are working on two platforms, micro and macro level. At micro level, we are doing the community-based services, where we are teaching them on health issues, on education, and various skills. As well as we are doing some specialized programs. Two specialized programs, one is FCC and another is CIC. FCC is Family Counseling Center and another is Crisis Intervention Center. Now friends, in Family Counseling Center, whenever a woman is coming to us with some problem and we involve the client, we give them various counseling sessions. At the last, we have come to know the problem is due to some sort of depression or some sort of mental block. I would like to give you an example for that. A few months ago, a woman came to our center. She was crying. She was in pain. And she said, I'm in problem because my mother-in-law used to abuse me. She goes out when my husband comes. She goes out when he is leaving home in the morning. She does not give any support to me. So when our counselor went to her home for home counseling, and when she talked to the lady, the mother-in-law said that when my son and daughter-in-law are together, all the time they fight. And when they fight, I have no option, but I just go out either to Gurudwara, because she belongs to a Sikh family. I go to the Gurudwara and sit there and spend my time there in peace. And I don't know what to do in such a situation. When her husband was counseled, then husband told that I don't know what has happened to my wife for the last 2 years. She was not like that before. Now she used to fight on every slight matter, on every trivial matter. And life has become hell. And when her children were contacted, interviewed, then we realized her behavior has to change for the children also. She does not give them food. She does not take care of them. Even she does not see the report card. And when the counselor could not understand that what to do, she gave the case to the psychologist. And then the psychologist said, this woman is suffering in acute depression. So what I want to say is that it's a fact of life that nowadays, in Indian situation, women are suffering. They are suffering with pain, they are suffering with depressions. So what I want to say is that how many sessions, how much time is involved to solve that case. If we understand this depression first, I think all this interpersonal relationship may not come. So understanding depression is very, very important. So what do? We all the time try to give medication. However, we are not expert. Our psychologists give. But we try to involve that girl or woman in some constructive activity. Very, very small activities. But friends, you will be surprised to know these small activities, when they are coming to the recreation center, when they are learning only some toy making, they are happy. They want to talk. They want to share. They want to discuss. And this helps them. And when we identify the problem, and when the lady goes back, then definitely with this individual, the family also is in peace. Family is also happy. And when families are happy, then definitely society is happy. And after 2007, technologies have accelerated. The world has become one village, global village. Human beings can adapt, but what is the speed? How can we adapt so fast everything? And there is the lacuna, there is the gap. The world is in despair, the world is in problem, the world is in pain. And from there, it transforms in society, communities, groups, families, and individual. So it's both way. Depression is in individual, depression is in society, depression is in universe. I'm in pain to read one article in Times of India that in 2020, 10% of Delhi, capital of India, will suffer one or another type of depression. Friends, it's a very difficult situation. When still in 21st century, 2017, we are not able to solve our physical ailments problems. Patients are in government hospitals, where we don't have a good number of psychologists and psychiatrists. We do not understand what is depression, what are the symptoms. And somewhere if we understand, still there is a stigma, there is a taboo. So it's a vicious circle and we have to break that circle. And I always like to talk about the solutions. So I would like to convey my simple message to Mr. Sahani and OP Jindal University. Yes, academicians should talk about this. Psychologists should talk about this. But it should percolate to the last person. And that is the family. That is the individual. That is the community. Still, we are talking so many things, but we don't talk about depressions. In every second house, you will get patient. Patient is there, but nobody is doing nothing. You will see every day one case or the another. I have another case in where I reside, in Rohini itself. One lady was suffering with acute depression. She was even getting the treatment also. But somehow, her husband died in between. She has 2 daughters. They also get this depression from the mother. And one day, all the 3 women died. They locked their house. And within 15 days, they died. Nobody is taking care of that. It has become a huge problem. I am a layperson. I am master's in social work, but I am not expert into this. But I can say this with conviction, that 21st century problem is depression. and we definitely have to resolve it. And I'm here with the students and research scholars and all the academicians. I too want to know what to do. I am running an NGO in Rohini, which has a huge population, and in every second house, whether we discuss family problem, whether we discuss child abuse problem, whether we discuss rape case, everywhere, when you reach at last conclusion, you will find there is some sort of depression, and nobody is acknowledging that. Nobody wants to acknowledge that. So I won't take much time. There will be a question-answer session. We will definitely talk. Thank you so much for giving me this chance.
So thank you very much, Dr. Shobha. We have eminent speakers with practical examples of what is going on in society. It's very interesting. I'm sure you will have lots of questions at the end of this session. Then our next speaker is Dr. Jitendra Nagpal. He's Program Director of Expressions India, the India Life Skills, Values, Community and Social Wellness Program. Expressions India program has over 2,500 children and adolescent centers, sensitization workshops, training programs and community seminars to its credit. Also, he is Senior Consultant Psychiatrist in charge of the Institute of Child Development and Adolescent Health at Mulchan Medicity. He's going to talk about childhood depression, implication and options for schools in India. Dr. Nagpal.
I have to believe that I'm the last speaker for the day and also the last speaker in the session. Nonetheless, I think the moments I've shared with Professor Sahani as a teacher of all seasons, I believe that when I speak to you, my day-to-day blues turn into pink health. And the reason being that you are much more charged than a mobile phone. So it helps me to, bhaiya thoda aur bata dijiye jara isme. It helps me to, as he said very rightly in his most anecdotal manner, that I'm one of the normal psychiatrists. So I believe in your emotions, sir. Thanks for making me feel good at the end of the day. I'm so honored to be next to Amanji and Dr. Sharan. Dr. Shobna, of course, has been a great mentor for many a people. But since I'm supposed to confine this journey for about 8 minutes and move away from depression, open the house for question answers, I thought it would be worthwhile to come on the dot, hit the nail on the target, school mental health. I have a colleague and a friend of mine, Dr. Asta Sharma, who is here, who's volunteered to be by my side today. And I'm sure you will hear her a little bit when she tells us about the child rights approach to school mental health. I'm sure you can, ma'am. Why are we looking at Dr. Sahani bringing in this topic very intelligently about the implication for the schools? As Churchill said, I'm not going to read the slides, so please read it yourself. He was right. He was right when he gave the freedom to India with the help of the Viceroy, that, okay, we have a nation where beyond the portals of health, we need to understand mental health. Beyond the counselors and doctors and so many other people who were leading the health industry, which was minuscule at that time, need to appreciate that education and health cannot be divorced from each other. Do you agree on that? I think we all agree. We have more schools in India than probably the entire population of children in Switzerland and Germany. That's what I was told. 17.5 lakh schools in the country and 17,000 schools by CBSE, which is 1% of the entire country's schools. And if that war is to be managed by psychiatrists and psychologists for the topic we are discussing today, we are heading for a disaster. It has to be managed by teachers, shadow mothers, by school managers, and maybe all cadre of people running the schools rather than people sitting in this hall. That's how the terminology of child-friendly schools emerged beyond the dark shadows of education. Are we having friendly schools? Are we having promotional ideas about mind and well-being in schools? I also learned recently, being partner to many of the government committees in education, that we started with literacy as an aim when our country started the campaign against education. Literacy mission. We turned it into education because literacy was not just enough. We called it child development in the 90s, and we now call it child rights because the right to education has come in. And a happy, well-being, meaningful ambience of a school is what a school is supposed to provide, a child rights approach to school. So a huge surrogate means of promoting child mental health by the school. Are we ready for it? Yes, we have to be, because we are bifurcating into the tentacles of community mental health, isn't it? And we all are sharing this helplessness, because as professionals, I come to understand that India needs about 17 lakh schools. We need at least about 1 lakh school counselors. 1 lakh, 17 lakh schools ke liye. Dearth, huge amount of scarcity, more than food and hunger in this country. Probably what we have, CBSE has just about 3,500 school counselors, and that's a role model board of the country. Asta is one of them. And I think the amount of helplessness we all face trying to come to terms with the burden of disease, ma'am, the burden of mental health disease coming up from the schools. One, because I am getting educated, and I have to confess, sir, that what we learned in books of psychiatry and psychology was absolutely archaic in comparison to what the teachers and counselors and principals are teaching us today. Because they're telling us, what, Dr. Nagpal, what are you seeing? Sitting at the clinical ambience, you're seeing the worst that may be coming to you. But we see the beginnings of those disasters at the school. I remember a role model of mine, a mentor, a very famous neurosurgeon. I would love to take his name because I believe in him, Professor A.K. Banerjee. Some of you have heard about him. The one who founded the neurosurgery department at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He saw me a few years back outside the chamber. He was with us in the hospital. And he said, why these unhappy looking kids keep sitting outside your chamber? They should be in the school, in the playground, or they should be laughing away with the family on the dining table. ये यूनिफॉर्म में टाई पहन के बच्चे तुम्हारे बाहर क्यों बैठे रहते हैं? And he said, then go out. Then don't tell me that this is depression with psychotic features, this is drug abuse with bipolar potential, and this is a child with sexual abuse history. He said, go out and find out. You'll lose one day's earnings, but go to the schools, ask the teachers. So that's the journey of school mental health started. But I'll not elaborate my achievement because sir had warned me. But I would claim, and I think I give the credit to the group of psychologists working with us, we probably stand alone as the only agency starting the National School Mental Health Program, re-strengthening it with the Health Ministry this month. And it's all credit to the group of psychology, hundreds of them who have been working on this field. So I think in the inclusive paradigm, when you people, all of you seem to be from the psychology background, isn't it? Most of you. Let me tell you, there'll be so much of fantabulous work awaiting for you when you come out into the portals of education. It is not about your practice as a clinician or an organizational psychologist or a HR psychologist. You will actually see the school of thought emerging as your career, not going into a school. But the fact that you talk about young ones and young minds who will actually want you, desire your presence, not to just hear them, to listen to them. Those few moments, as what ma'am said rightly, both of them said. So it is for that, I'm not classifying, I'm not going to nomenclature, but we know you name the disorder, it starts in childhood. You name the schizophrenias, majority of them, they begin in adolescence. Simple is the highest. You name the bipolarity, we have case examples, 12-year-old mania, 13-year-old manic coming in. You name the degenerative tendencies after drug abuse, it's happening in childhood. So where are we talking about adult psychology, beginning with child psychology? A lot of students come to us and ask us, will child psychology help me as a career? I said, you cannot practice adult psychology without knowing child psychology and enough of it. So attaching yourself to a school is actually an enrichment to your life, not a career. You actually go back home much happy seeing adult patients because you went to a school to hear out children. You will actually save millions of families from facing disasters because you help their children. I know of so many parents who come and tell us, I think the report card day for the child is a marital strife. Because when they go back home, they actually have marital discord about who performs what for the child. And that is how principals tell us that, okay, I land up actually saving so many couples from getting separated on a report card day. because this is how we need help. So the bridge between us and the child is actually the school now. One, because I think when you look at emotional safety and behavioral safety, the National Commission of Child Rights is coming up with this fine document, but I hope it doesn't remain a document. It translates into action. This is what we are experiencing. The right to education followed by Juvenile Justice Act, where myself and Asta were part of it. I think it has helped us to discover a lot of mindset about the young people who are not only in conflict with law, but they need care and protection. Let me tell you, the JJ Act or the POXO Act, what you people are going to see in your syllabus and curriculum, is nothing to do with law. A lot to do with law, but it will help mental health a lot. It will help those people who are vulnerable to a whole spectrum of disorders to actually come to terms with the disciplining, the areas of enrichment of their mental health. So are we prepared to create a psychosocial friendly school or a climate of mental health in schools? This is what WHO has told us to be followed in the years to come, these 7-8 points. I'm not going through them. We can open it for question answers. I just want, before I close, these are areas where I think all of you are going to grapple with. Internet addiction disorders, internet gaming disorder, mobile addiction disorders. So these are the new nomenclature in the DSM and ICDs, which I think is applicable to a 9-year-old or a 7-year-old. And whether these are virtues of fallout of a lack of communicating family, you all need to see that. I thought it was worth to mention this because we are a vocal society now. We are articulating child abuse. We are discussing, sharing, emoting a lot of child abuse now. And the child abuse report of 2007 by the WCD ministry, and therefore the making of the POXO Act after that, I think it's a huge instrument of mental health. Please do have a look. Not about law. When you talk of protecting children against any disadvantage or exploitation, you're actually talking mental health because less amount of emphasis was given on trauma and coping. But when we emphasize this to the schools, then they realize that they need a lot of training. A lot of teachers, a lot of school systems are going to approach. I have requested, sir, also that Jindal University can actually partner with a lot of schooling systems in the country for enriching the behavioral sciences department, because that's where you learn the entire spectrum of psychology, not only child. Now, these are discussions going on to analyze the psyche of a bully or a bullied, whether there are personality changes, and do our counselors equipped for that? Do teachers need to understand the psyche of a child? Now, it's just not about a case of bullying. We tend to pass it off as cases. We are taught in the medical school also, ye case dekha, wo case dekha. We forget the human in that. Now, when you learn psychology, let's not forget the human in trying to see the number of cases we saw every day. Because that's where I think we then reduce ourselves to maybe stereotypical clinicians rather than take a humanitarian approach to understanding the. Sounds like an inverted prism, but this is what WHO now recommends as a comprehensive intervention model for promoting school mental health and therefore minimizing the risk of high-grade depression, if that is the common cold of psychology, depression. And if that can be taken as a decentralized, a destigmatized approach to mental health. Good evening, sir. Then I think the last part, which I was trying to tell, decentralizing the services might become a little easier, because we tend to localize by virtue of the stigma attached to even whether it is women or elderly people or the child who is in help-seeking mode. So if you take this as a single flyer imprinted in our mind, I think all of us can work on all the 4 levels of this intervention rather than the last level, which was meant for us, the group 4, where the professional intervention at school mental health is thought of. Not required, but then thought we'll just share with you what the students across the country, the CBSE, the HRD, have actually partnered with the Health Ministry and the people like you and us for bringing close to. Now, this has operationalized for mental health professionals, the POXO Act. I think I'm repeating this because this takes care of a lot of gamut of child coping mechanisms while being put to any disadvantage. It could be abuse or even neglect, ignorance. Now, we have made the guidelines. We means we all put together, the government and the non-governmental organizations. It seems to be working in the schooling system now. The teacher training has happened in a big way for the nation. If you look at this these are few. Sir had asked me to share how adolescent as peer educators can serve as sentinels for the schools, the guardians of school mental health. I think it's working well. You must have read the papers. The Secretary Health Ministry has actually sought models where rural mental health of adolescents can be managed by the peer educators. So they have sought models, we have submitted, and let's see how it moves. The International Adolescent Summit every year takes care of some of the areas where the young leaders of the school, say 9th, 10th, and 11th, they actually become the peer mentors for leading the school mental health programs, right? Using film as a technology, short films as a technology for mental health. So these are the areas where we found student as a right for promoting mental health as a wagon which can take it forward. Now, if you see this last, what I'm trying to show you is, I advocate a bullying-free school. I am a peer educator for leading life skills, mental health, and values in the school. It only shows that there is a desire to become a mentor. But are we giving them this population importance to actually become our guardians for school mental health? 24% of our population is adolescents, which is nearly the population of United States of America. Only adolescents in our country, 10 to 19 years, is one of the largest populations of the world. Thank you.
A moderator always has, at meetings such as this conference, is a very difficult job to waive time, 2 minutes only, when an interesting talk is going on, and I apologize for that. I was, as I said at the start, I was standing in for Dr. Desai, who has just returned. So I would like to invite him to say a few words. Please, Dr. Desai, because we are all waiting to hear from you as well.
Dr. Desai is the director of Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences.
Yes.
A very renowned.
Some years ago, many years ago, I used to sport a beard. And the advantage was that you couldn't see too easily if you blushed. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry because of too many things. But today is possibly one of those days where it's my turn to keep tendering apologies. Because the World Health Organization sitting in that European city declared the theme for the World Health Day, 7th April 2017, to be on depression, a few of us have a bit of a juggling around to do. And so there is a number of things that which are happening today and tomorrow and over the weekend. And so those of you who were here at 3 when the launch of this session took place, I did try and come, and then I scooted. I scooted for a program that I immensely enjoyed, I must say. And I must share that with you because there is so much of a variety of things that all of us ought to be doing and we are doing. I'm so sorry I missed all of these interesting talks. But I'm just coming back from a live television program on Doordarshan on Hindi film songs and how to beat depression and how to keep the positive motivation going. So that was wonderful. That was very nice. One of my interests overlapping with mental health is about Hindi cinema and films and film music and stuff, amongst other things. But truly, my apologies to especially Dr. Sahni and Dr. Rajkumar and JGU and to the 3 speakers sincerely. And sir, thank you very much. I'm sorry we haven't met, but thank you for sitting in and standing in both. I don't like being the truant child or truant adult or elderly, but whatever that is. Some weeks ago, as was said at 3 o'clock, Dr. Rajkumar and Dr. Sanjeev Sahni particularly and his team, and I must say, where is Garima? Is Garima around? Garima, yes, hi. They've been all very kind because we have done more than a few events together. We have had the intent and the plan to collaborate on research projects together, which for some reasons of how the projects go haven't turned out. But Sanjeev Sahni and we have been long time friends and more, only in the Indian context. In the American context, when you say friends and more, even across the same gender, that means very different things. So a few weeks ago, when he asked me individually and more importantly for my organization to join this effort, I was very happy and privileged. As I heard him say, and Dr. Rajkumar say at the start, about 3 to 3:20 or so, 3:30, a pandemic like depression. And for those of you who haven't registered, please register. I am, from this April onwards, beginning to see depression as a pandemic. It's not even an epidemic. The last pandemic we have had in human history was? Sorry? The HIV/AIDS. I think we need to recognize that depression specifically and mental health problems in general have reached pandemic proportions. But that's one point. And I have a lot of data to support that belief. The pandemic of depression, like HIV and AIDS required, equally if not more, requires so much more of effort from all directions. And as was said in that inaugural part, universities and centers and departments of universities like JGU, hospital-based academic centers like JIBS, NGOs, individuals, small groups, international NGOs, or indeed, if I might say, the media, the popular media particularly, not just the serious media. Serious human thinking and writing does serve a purpose, and not to undermine that ever in one's correct senses, ever, unless one goes psychotic. But much more of human change and social reform happens, I believe, by popular media than does by serious thinking and writing. The intelligentsia reads, the magazines and the monographs that some of us write or contribute to, or as Dr. Sahni does publish. But popular media of all hues, all nature of popular media, is actually what determines the social attitudes and the human psychic responses. And so I think many of us need to come together for a pandemic like depression. That's my first major point that I want to share. And I'm sure many other talks, but Jiten Nagpal, my dear friend, one more dear friend for a long time, his talk must have exposed this issue of how you require intersectoral collaboration. The second point, if I might say, and our Australian friends are here, the second major point when it comes to depression and mental health that I have had a preoccupation with and done some little research on, not too well or too good yet, is what's been my apprehension since early days in psychiatry, my early days in psychiatry. They weren't possibly early days of psychiatry or mental health, but for me they were early days. But certainly at the turn of the century and more, after my exposure and learning in public health, I've had one major concern. And India as a country, as a society, I think needs to guard against that, which is the danger of over-psychiatricizing. Surely we need to get people to come forth and accept if one has a problem and seek treatment or help, counseling, psychotherapy, drug treatment, whatever else. Sure, we need to reduce the treatment gap, which is about 80%, if not 90%, which is humongous and unfortunate. But in doing so, I wonder if we are likely to fall prey to what, with all respect, and I think one of our keynote speakers, is he around or has he left? He's from the US too, right? Wasn't there? Oh, she is from. But wasn't there the person in the inaugural address? My humble and dispassionate inference learning has been that some societies like the US of A and the North American societies have possibly made or let happen the error of over-psychiatricizing, if not also over-psychologizing the human existence. As I've often said, and again, I keep saying this again and again with all respect for friends present here and the nation and the society there. In the US, if you, everyone has, I mean, out of 100 people, 120 people have a treating psychiatrist. You know, everyone but everyone has more than one psychiatrist or counselor at a point of time, not even lifetime. You know, and like Sanjeev Sani was saying, yes, it's great that they have that forthright, accepting attitude. But the danger, I believe, and having lived and worked there for some periods, besides all the gathering, the danger is that you actually over-psychologize. In a lighter way, as I often say, if you sneeze too often, you go to your analyst and say, "Dak sahab, cheek bahut aati hai." You know, there must be a Freudian explanation. Something must have happened when I was 2 or 3 years old. I sneezed too much. And the analyst, for sure, with all respect to Freud, great guy, you know, honestly the greatest guy ever, perhaps, and I mean this positively, no sarcasm, the analyst will find a reason of what must have happened when I was 2 or 3 years old, why I sneezed too much. At the other end of the spectrum is a person who doesn't sneeze at all, asnesia. For that also you go to an analyst and say, you know, I don't sneeze at all. I'm just making one point, and please don't take that literally or seriously or exaggeratedly. But I really believe that the point is, do we want to, as a human society, turn every day-to-day psychological experience for an individual or for individuals, or interpersonal experience between two people or across a small group, to a DSM diagnosis? And then, of course, don't forget, with all respect again, but less, the pharma companies are eagerly waiting that you do so. 1600, I think 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, not the Washington address, White House address, 1400 or 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. American Psychiatric Association. American Psychiatric Association, the pharma industry is waiting that out of 100 people, all 100, if not 120 people again, should be on medication. If pharma companies could help it, all of us here should be on medication forever for one or the other problem. And there are, I mean, let's face it, there are pure commercial dimensions to this. Pharma industry has done great service to alleviating human misery in general health and physical health, specifically in the area that I happen to know more about, even amongst general health, mental health. Psychiatry and mental health today is able to stand confidently and say to the society that we can treat, you know, almost all conditions of clinical mental health or psychiatry because of pharmacology and the advances in psychotherapy and counseling and brain sciences. But having recognized that, we have to recognize that the pharma companies have a tremendous, well-organized machinery to catch on human misery. And let me just illustrate that with one point. I don't know how many of us, maybe many of us, as I look around, must have been very young, but those of us who were very young, even they remember, and those of us who were not very young will remember. 9/11, it wasn't the only or the major disaster in human history, but again, I mean, one nation would like all of human history to believe that that was the only disaster in human history ever, the World Trade Center coming down. The three major pharma giants of the US, in the first 2 weeks, trebled their TV promotion budget for tranquilizers. Now, please register the significance. I can understand if the sale of tranquilizers and psychotropics went up. People went to the shops and licit or illicit started getting more tranquilizers. Perfectly understandable. I can understand if the physicians, family physicians or psychiatrists started prescribing more and more tranquilizers immediately following a disaster. We have a huge track record in Indian disaster situations, and so please believe me when I say that in Gujarat earthquake and tsunami down south, we have demonstrated this. Prescriptions go up, distress goes up, medicines may not be required, but people tend to take medication and psychiatrists tend to write medication. So far, understandable, although not very good. But please register the fact that I'm talking about. The American laws provide for advertising, with of course caveats and disclaimers. The three major pharma giants in the US, I repeat, in the first 2 weeks, trebled their TV promotion budget for tranquilizers. If that's not evidence of, yes sir, I got it. If that is not evidence of organized capitalizing for money on human misery, I don't know what is. So there's a danger. There's a danger not just of excessive westernization or Americanization of our society or any society. There is not only the danger of over-psychologizing as a very unconscious social process, which is of course there, but there is a danger of huge pharma, organized industry-driven problem of over-psychologizing, over-psychiatricizing. How do we as a society, or how does human race as a community, global community, strike that very nice, fine balance of getting almost everybody, if not everybody, who requires treatment and who can benefit from treatment or help to treatment, and yet not overdoing it? That's the question. And for the next generation of professionals and mental health activists, who I see in plenty here, I think the challenge is there. There is definitely one challenge in decreasing treatment gap, people making more aware, reducing the stigma, talking about depression. But if I might end, we all know, at least those of us who are actively in clinical mental health or those of us who are even watching peripherally, just like the psychomotor retardation or the absence of speech in a person with depression is a problem, the strategy of let's talk is equally dangerous in terms of the talk becoming more like the excessive talk of a manic person. And if you have 4 or 5 manics together in a room, you have had it. So my final message is that while we need to talk about depression, we need to all be very aware and not just plan but strategize for how are you going to retain the spontaneity and the naturalness of human existence and the miseries or the pleasures of day-to-day human life, and yet get those who can benefit from treatment to treatment. To my mind, while we need to increase awareness, we need to be really, really very careful about that, because otherwise, for those of us who might have read, Colin McCullough, who wrote the famous classic Thornbirds in the 70s, also wrote a very small, for her, very small, book called A Creed for the Third Millennium. Colin McCullough, the author of Thornbirds, wrote a book called Creed for the Third Millennium, published in the 70s, set in 2033 in the US. Now 2033 seems pretty close, but in the 70s it seemed very far out. And she described what she calls as millennium neurosis. And I have no hesitation in saying that sometimes the fiction writers, beginning with Shakespeare, to everybody else, to Colin McCullough, can describe human situation much better than all of us scientists together might. And so Colin McCullough's millennium neurosis, if that doesn't have to become a reality, we all need to be careful. And I think India as a country and as a society has the opportunity not just to find the correct balance for itself, for ourselves, but possibly demonstrating to the world that we need not swing to either materialism and be misery, full of misery, nor do we need to be so ignorant of mental health problems as we have been and keep suffering. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to invite you to sit. Thank you very much, Dr. Desai, and thank you for coming back to give a very interesting talk. I'd like to open the floor for...
No, we don't have...
No questions? Okay. So may I invite Dr. Sani to...
So
give
just
the, yeah.
may I request all of you to take your questions to the dinner, and thank you so much all the wonderful speakers for such pragmatic and practical session.